Greetings, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on the locality where you are. This is the COMETSA Radio Worldwide, the mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. This is the African online radio station with a global reach. We're streaming live from Johannesburg to the rest of the world. And we are back with our monthly series, the show titled Bridging Cultures. Last time when we were together, we were talking about the Chinese culture. Today we're going to be looking at the South Korean culture, and that is the one before we close the year with one country in Africa, and we will announce that towards the end of the show. As always, our show is based on the principle called the idea. We inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and associate, we support and network. That's the idea. I'm joined by my co-anchor, my friend Dean Foster from New York. Dean, you have been traveling quite extensively. I wish I could travel with you because I know you always uncover some interesting things about cultures. Greetings to you and say hi to our listeners.
Sam, greetings to you and greetings to all the listeners. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again and to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is how to work effectively when working in other cultures. And Sam, that's a great idea. Let's travel together whenever we can. I know that we would have a lot of fun. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, indeed. And you know the type of cultures that we bring to this show are quite very interesting cultures for various reasons, you know. And I would love talking about these cultures, and we're gonna talk about South Korean culture. And you and I, we always say that we bring somebody who is an insider to that culture from a practical experience. And we have today a young man that I've observed growing to be where he is today. And we will introduce him very soon. His name is Kabelo Maponya. But then, how is New York and how is US so far?
Well, so far it's becoming wintertime here, of course. So it's beginning to get a little bit chilly, the weather. And of course, the U.S. What can I say about the culture and the politics of my country? Oh my goodness, it's very complex
Yeah.
and very, very difficult to summarize. But I like to think that when people ask me where am I from, I say I'm from New York City. I'm
Yeah.
not from the US. I'm from
Yeah.
New York City because New York City is, as you know, a culture of its own and
Mm.
a much more global and international perspective than most of the rest of the country. And so I'm very pleased to be back here in New York in my home base. I cannot
Mm.
say it's my home, but because I do travel a great deal, but it is my home base.
Mm.
And maybe my home is the world. I'd like to think that. And just returned from some travels in Sardinia and Corsica. It was half and half. Due to some work and also some pleasure. So it's always the best to combine the two, some pleasure travel and do some work as well. Very interesting, very different cultures on those two very different islands.
Indeed. And thank you, Dean, for sharing with us the top 10 tips for working across global cultures.
Sam, it's my pleasure. And I was about to post them because I post lots of cultural tips and information on a periodic basis. But I thought that if we posted them today, the listeners might be interested in having a look at this. This is a top 10 list. It's a quick checklist for the things you need to look out for when you work across cultures anywhere in the world, not just as any specific one culture, but anywhere in the world. So have a look at these. You can see all of my postings on my Substack website, which is deanfosterglobal.substack.com. And and if you're interested, I'd be more than pleased to send you more information. Just contact me at the links that are at the website.
Indeed, indeed. Beautiful, beautiful. Once again, let me welcome the listeners that have tuned in from all over the world. We are looking forward to a very insightful and educating conversation with our guest. Right now, I'm just welcoming my friend, Dean Foster, who's my co host of this show, a monthly show that takes place here at COMETSA Radio Worldwide. And indeed, we talk about the different cultures. My job is really to be the moderator of the show. In the background, allow Dean to engage with our guests. And of course, in the second half, the second part of the show, we are going to be engaging with you using what we call the South Korea culture quiz. That's always the best moment of the show, Dean. And I'm glad we're going to continue with that practice. Then, before we welcome our guest, we started talking about your travels. And maybe just tell us, our listeners, shortly, what makes you travel so much, and what type of
Um,
job do you do?
Yeah, well, my work is to help my clients, and the clients are mainly Fortune 500 companies, big global companies who do work in many different countries around the world, to help my clients to work better by understanding the cultures that they are working in. So we know that people do work differently in different cultures. So the same task that can be done one way in one culture can be done very differently in another culture. And if you're going to work successfully in any culture, you have to understand how these differences affect what you do. Now, we know that everywhere around the world, work is somewhat similar. People have to negotiate, people have to manage teams, people have to supervise, people have to build relationships with each other and in the workplace. So there are many themes that are similar no matter where we go. But how we do these things, how we resolve conflict, how men and women relate with each other in the office, how we motivate people, how we manage people, all of these things can be done very differently. So the themes are the same, but the way we do it, it can be different, and it is often different because of our culture. So if we understand these cultural differences, we can work far more effectively with each other. So that's what takes me around the world. My clients need me to go to different places and to help their teams, help their individuals work more effectively with each other. And we go in and we do cultural training programs, consultation programs. We meet with the people, we bring them together, we help them understand each other, and I think we've been very effective at doing this for almost, well, over 30 years now. We were one of the first organizations to focus solely on culture as an effective tool for doing business worldwide. And of course, we've done many programs on South African culture, and we've done programs on almost every culture in the world. I am very, very privileged to have people to work with who are so knowledgeable about these different cultures,
Mm.
and they bring their knowledge to the table and help us deliver this kind of information everywhere in the world we go.
I'm amazed at your consistency, Dean, in terms of your work on culture and how you manage to make commercially and profit inclined business leaders sit back and listen to you without actually talking numbers. And I still remember that's actually how we met some years ago in London. And you have
That's
just
right.
been so consistent. And for me, I think that is justified for us to say you are indeed the expert. And for that, that's why we have you today as our co-anchor. Which other platforms other than your Substacks can other people reach you?
Well, you can go directly to my website, which is deanfosterglobal.com. That's deanfosterglobal.com. And there you can contact me. You can see all of my posts, Substack and otherwise. And you can see some of the work that we do and the different kinds of programs that we offer. And certainly I would love to meet you and talk about some of the challenges that you might be facing in your own personal career or in your workplace and see if there's a way that we can help. It's always good to learn about the challenges that others face and see if there's a way that understanding the culture can make things a little bit easier. So those are two main areas. You can also read some of my books if you like. If you are if you can't sleep at night and you need some reading material, I suggest take a look at, and you're interested in culture. I've written 5 books. My first book is called Bargaining Across Borders, and it's about how different cultures negotiate in different ways. And then I wrote a series of books called the Global Etiquette Guides. And there's a global etiquette guide for different regions around the world. So we have one for Europe. We have a global etiquette guide for Asia, a global etiquette guide for Africa. We have a global etiquette guide for Latin America. And for each of these, we have a different chapter on different countries. And in our Africa book, the Global Etiquette Guide to Africa, we have a separate chapter on South Africa as well. So you might be interested in taking a look at some of my books and some of my articles. All of that is available from my website. So that's
Uh,
deanfosterglobal.com.
and will we get to know your associates in South Africa that works with you, that we can reach out to them or not?
Yes, of course you can. And I'd be more than happy to introduce you to them because we would want to work very closely with you and my team in South Africa so that if you're in South Africa, we can deliver information for you on any culture that you might be interested in.
Beautiful. Great stuff. Let's welcome our guest. Kabelo Maponya is tuning in from Cape Town, Western Cape Province. Kabelo, I have come to accept that you are no longer a Gautenger. You're always a guest here. Welcome.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Dean. It's great to be here with you guys and the listeners. Great privilege and an honor to be with you guys.
Beautiful.
Well,
How's Cape
Kabelo,
Town?
I'm very interested in your experiences in South Africa because you can bring very up to date information to the listeners.
My experience in South Africa.
I'm sorry, in South Korea.
Oh yes, man, we've got some time to talk about that. Surely, yeah, a really interesting experience. I spent a number of years over there teaching English
Mm,
to speakers of second languages, mostly to kids under the age of 18. But then later on, I started teaching adults as well, which became a really good font of knowledge as well.
beautiful.
Fantastic.
Beautiful. Kabelo, how is Cape Town?
Firstly, I take umbrage with what you said there. I'll always be Gautenger, Sam. I'm always visiting Cape Town, so let's get that right. Firstly, uh,
Mm,
but I really do like Cape Town. It's great. I think it's just also the fact that it's a change for me. So I'll always like something that's newer than what is a little bit older. But I mean, it's different. It's just a bit of a different lifestyle. But yeah, very nice. But again, I'm a Joe Burger by heart.
Yeah. Who is Kabelo, if we may ask?
That's a very interesting question. I've been staring at that question for a while, and I guess where it's relevant, in terms of what's relevant here. I think more than anything, I'm just a person. I'm just a human being. I happen to like to travel. As I get older, I become more interested in things like politics. Particularly what's becoming really prevalent and important now, kind of intersectional identity politics, that kind of stuff, how it bleeds into our cultures, how it kind of creates a lens through which we see culture in the first place, that kind of stuff. But I'm also a very happy-go-lucky guy. I like to laugh. I like to be happy. I like to watch movies and tell jokes, that kind of thing. I like to be active a bit, that kind of thing. Just your normal run-of-the-mill person.
Wow. Then you might be wondering how Katlego got to embark onto a journey professionally that took him to that part of the world.
Absolutely. I'd like to hear more about that. And that's very, very interesting. Why South Korea? How did that happen?
Sure, I'd love to tell you. So it was around 2010. I have a very close friend. Her name is Caitlin. We actually work together at the moment, or we work for the same company. And I just finished university. I'd done about just under a year's worth of work after university. I wasn't really into it. You know how it can be. Just I was very young, and I had my big ideas, and I wanted to travel. And it was a bit of a challenge financially how to do that. My friend Caitlin came up with a great idea, which was to teach English overseas as a means to travel. We chose South Korea because it happened to be the best destination, both financially and just in terms of opportunities.
Right, right.
Yeah. That's the short of it. But after that, of course, there are some certificates and qualifications you have to get, which I did complete at WITS, which was really, really cool. After that was just going through all of those applications and getting this from Home Affairs and that from the embassy, and crossing your fingers at the end of the day. Quite a few interviews, but ultimately it was worth it.
Well, I really applaud your perspective on trying to just get out into the world and learn from your own experiences through travel, because that is the way to really understand what's going on in the rest of the world. It's one thing to study, and I don't disparage, of course, a university experience. Everyone who wants one should have one, but it sounds like you were very eager to have real on-the-ground experiences in other cultures, and that's to be applauded. Congratulations to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I wouldn't, as much as I'd like to take all the credit for everything, I can't take credit for all of that. I think I grew up in a family that really did value that kind of exploration. My grandmother, she traveled to London long ago, in a time where it was very difficult to be African in that sense and travel overseas. My mother went on a tour when I was very younger called the Contiki Tour. I'm sure a few of our listeners have heard about that, where she traveled around Europe. So I've had these examples in my life where I've looked at these people that I admire and I've wanted to follow in their footsteps somewhat.
And you just had to get out there and see it for yourself.
100%.
Good for you.
Dean, are you on headphones?
Yes, I am. Can you
Okay.
hear me well?
Yeah, there's some people are saying that they can't hear you, but some people hear you well. So I'm hearing you very well, loud and clear. So I'm just asking the colleagues to keep on commenting. If there's any improvement, we'll appreciate that. Um, yeah, so that's beautiful. Um, let's welcome Kabelo's mother so that she feels home. Lewu, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Good evening, listeners. My name is Lebogang Mesakwa. I'm Kabelo's mom, as he described himself, a happy soul. And thank you so much, Sam, for inviting us to the show. And affording us the opportunity to reflect on Kabelo's journey, or rather our journey, of him living and teaching in Korea and subsequently China. In fact, this is the first time that we get to engage on that journey, and it's such a privilege. Thank you so much, Sam.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Then, before we continue reliving the journey of Kabelo, do you have any cultural fundamentals around about South Korea that you want to throw into the space, or will you want to do that as Kabelo take us through his journey?
We can do both, Sam. Why not? Cabela raised a very important point, and I'm glad that he did, about intersectionality, because we can talk about any culture, South Korea, South Africa, U.S., China, and look at some very specific things that make each one very different. But there's more to what one experiences when you work with other people in other countries than just their culture. There, every individual is the result of many forces. Their culture, certainly, but also their generation, their gender, their ethnicity, and the intersection of all of these things creates that person and creates the behavior that you see when you work with that individual. So, thinking about, how do I be more effective when I work in South Korea, or when I work in South Africa, or when I work anywhere? Very, very important to look at the culture, because the culture is one of the most primary reasons why people behave the way they do. But it's not the only reason. And that's very important. Sometimes the individual that you're working with is simply, you're seeing their behavior because that's who their personality is. That's their DNA. It may not be so cultural. And if that individual has had a great deal of experience working in other cultures, they may not be typical of their own culture. So, for example, if I'm working with someone in South Korea who has also had a great deal of experience in other countries, they understand how to work in South Korea. They are very South Korean, but they are also probably very much aware of how to do things differently. So every individual is a little bit different, and under putting all these pieces together, understanding the influence of not just culture, but personality, DNA, generation, age, etc., all of that, the intersections of all of that is very important. So thank you, Cabela, for bringing that up. And I'm going to add one more point to that, which is to say that when we look at South Korea specifically, this is a very important issue, because in South Korea we have the older South Korean traditions, which go back thousands of years. Now, traditions that are that old don't die very quickly. They have power and they have influence. But at the same time, today, we have this modern culture of South Korea. It's one of the most dynamic and the most modern places in the world. It was, I think it's the most wired country in the world. Or today, we should really say it's the most unwired country, but it is the most technologically advanced country in the world per capita. So we have this very modern state. And if you go to Seoul, it's an extremely modern international city, and lots of young people who are living under the influence of global forces. It's hard to see the traditional forces of ancient Korean culture, but they are there. But they are there. They are there, but they are hidden. And so, whenever we work anywhere in the world today, but especially true for a place like South Korea, you have to separate, you have to dig a little bit to find the ancient roots, but you must understand them because they influence in many subtle ways how things are being done. So you have the modern and the ancient all together, all wrapped up in one very interesting country.
Beautiful. Kabelo, I'm sure some of the listeners are asking themselves, what educational background and personality traits is Kabelo having to have landed where he landed? So maybe quickly, without really wasting too much time around South Africa, but what did you study, and at what point did you feel that you needed to take this direction? And where did you study?
So firstly, I studied at Rhodes University there in the Eastern Cape in Grahamstown. I studied philosophy and psychology. I did my honors in philosophy. I had law with me. I was taking that as a triple major as well, but I dropped that in third year. That was a bit too much for me, not really my aptitude. From there, like I said, I came back to Joburg. I did want to study a PGCE, which is a postgrad certificate in education, after I finished my honors in philosophy, but I couldn't get into that year that I wanted to go through. And I suppose going to Korea was a way for me to still exercise that, I don't know, maybe let's say scratch that educational itch that I had. So in a sense, it kind of landed me in the same, I suppose you say, industry or occupation vertical as the PGCE would have, but just in a different way, right? I think I knew that I was going to want to go travel even before I graduated. You know, even with the PGCE, had I done that, it would have given me the qualifications to travel and teach in any case, just probably slightly different things or in different places, you know?
And how did the idea of now venturing into teaching English for non-English speaking students start?
You know, it was because I had a good friend, Brinley, at the time, who left Rhodes a year or two before I did. And we kind of kept in touch a little bit over LinkedIn, particularly, which was still quite new at the time. And I would just see like all of his pictures and on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's also where Caitlin also came up with the idea. You know, he had moved up into a position of recruitment or a recruiter. And we thought, you know what, let's reach out to this young man and see if he's got any advice for us. We reached out to him and he did. From there, he gave us a lot of information as to who to reach out to, what to avoid, what to definitely try hard to get, because, you know, not all the opportunities are the same over there. But again, it was just through a network of people and just observing people that had been traveling and just really having an itch to travel and also being willing to do just about anything to travel. Because if your ultimate goal is to travel, really, it doesn't matter what you're doing while you're doing it to afford to do it, if that makes sense.
I'm trying to imagine how the first conversation with your mom started about this big decision that you had to take.
You know what? I can't even remember. Probably like most of our conversation starts when I come to her and I tell her I'm going to do something outrageous. I don't know. You might have to ask her if I'm being honest.
Kabelo, we were just interested in learning from you and Lebu how that first discussion started. Lebu, do you want to share with the listeners from the mother's perspective and also how you experienced that first engagement about him wanting to go to South Korea?
Yes, Sam, I had started, I don't know up to what stage you
Yeah, we didn't hear
but in any
anything.
case, you didn't hear anything.
No.
Okay, so I was traveling from the Eastern Cape, where we had a family function. Coming back to Joburg when Kabelo called me and said, "Mama, we need to talk," and I knew that something was, going down or gonna go down. So I get home and I call him, and then we talk, and then he says to me, "I'm coming back home." I mean, that was in early March. So he had been at school for like 4 weeks or so. And he had enrolled for journalism because he couldn't get into the postgraduate diploma in teaching. So then he said, no, because I can't do this course, So we had discussions previously about him not really liking the course. But I didn't think it would get to a point where he would want to quit. So that was quite, it was quite a heavy discussion. I didn't see it coming.
Sorry, could I just add something to that as well?
Yes.
Because we had a few discussions, and what my mom was leaving out is that I didn't just say I'm coming home, because remember I'd enrolled in courses and all these fees had been paid. So during the week she was away, I'd gone and I deregistered everything, and I'd gotten all the money sent back into the account. I'd gotten a position to work on the Monday. I was gonna come back home over the weekend. On Monday I was gonna start working at my father's business. So there wasn't really a lot of wiggle room at the end of it. And I knew I had to kind of do it that way because in a sense, I didn't want to be convinced out of it, if that makes sense. So I'd kind of made the preparations to come home in that sense. Yeah.
And then everybody put their hands on the process, and ultimately you found yourself in South Korea. Were there any shocks? Were there any regrets? Initially, how was the first experience of arriving in that foreign land?
Okay, so this is where the South African experience, I think, comes in. So I've had a really privileged life from really hardworking parents, which I'm very grateful for. We were able to move into the suburbs in about 1990. So already there was I started learning to adapt to different cultures, different people, they spoke different languages, a different language in Rimran Park, where I was living now from Soweto. The people all look different, So over the years, I think that's just something that we all kind of we experience as South Africans, being so diverse. So I think when I got to Korea, I didn't really have that much of a culture shock, or at all. I never really felt a real kind of existential discomfort while I was there. The homesickness I felt wasn't very deep. It was for the people at home that I loved, and not for the experience of being at home. So yeah, I didn't really experience any culture shock. It was more, I think I felt more reverse culture shock when I came back after all those years, coming back to South Africa and having to reacclimatize or reacclimate to the society and the way that people do things. Because when you're here and you're home, you're so much more involved in all of the discussions that are important in everyone's day to day. Whereas if you're an expat, you kind of have this barrier between the politics or the government and this and that, and yourself. There is a barrier. It's kind of like, it's not really my baby. I don't really live here. So coming back and I suppose really reintegrating into a society fully was more of a challenge.
Wow. We want to hear more about that. Then there's some questions here that will need your experience to handle. Firstly, they want you to describe the culture, national cultures, but also Leonard Mabuse is saying that most young people are struggling to settle into job that offers career path in the long term. Some have turned in all sorts of interesting ventures which baffles parents. What role is culture playing in these scenarios?
Oh my goodness, there's so much I need to say right now. For, first of all, I do like that comment about, what is national culture? Because it's hard to define. But very simply, national culture is the way we do things here in our country. Now, when you look at a country as diverse, for example, as South Africa, we know that there are lots of different kinds of people and lots of different factors that determine people's behaviors. But when we step back and take a big picture look, not just saying what's the difference between Cape Town and Johannesburg, what's the difference between the way women do it and the way men do it, what's the difference between people who are under 30 and people who are over 40 do it, what's the difference between this ethnic group and that ethnic group and the way they do things. Instead of looking at all of those very, very different ways of doing things, if you step back and then look at South Africa as a whole, and then compare that to the way we do things in another country, that's when you see what defines national culture. And it's usually the intersection of all of these things. So, yes, you can see differences when you take close up looks at different people, different groups, different places within any culture. But when you step back, you can see how that one culture really does do things generally differently from the way we do them in any other culture. And that's the influence of national culture.
Wow.
And yeah, that's very important, I think, to always keep in mind. The individual can be very different from their national culture, but interestingly, when they go into the workplace, those differences usually subordinate to the greater national culture. So I can be very different as an individual to some other individual in South Africa. But when we go into the workplace, we kind of behave the same way because there is the expectation to behave in a South African way. And that's true everywhere we go, every country.
Kabelo, you are now a role model, or we're going to use you as an example to maybe see our culture backward based on your experience. When you were in South Korea and you look back into South Africa, what about South Africa that really became of use to you to settle down and make it in South Korea?
Great question there, Sam. I think that, again, South Africans, we come from a very tumultuous history. It's very recent. We have this ability we're very adaptable to, I think, new and uncomfortable situations. I think it's something that we've had to be to just survive and be somewhat of an integrated culture. I think being, again, a sense of humor about things, being ready to face difference and look at yourself clearly, right? Because that's what we do over here. Most of our comedy, if we watch it, most of the commentary we have is kind of, it's kind of based on our races and our racial differences and our racial similarities and cultural, the culture fits in there as well. So I think through, I guess, a life where the society is always kind of pushing a bit of a racial narrative, this racial and cultural narrative that gets pushed to us, it really requires us to do a lot of introspection, really find out who you are, what is your identity, how do you fit in to the country in which you live, and how do you fit in, how could you fit into different cultures? Can you fit in? Are you willing to fit in? All of these things. And I think being a South African, just a cultural experience, our experience with diversity, with the other, so to speak, I think that really put me in good stead to succeed over there. That, and we have certainly when I was at school, we had a really, really good primary and high school education, which to this day serves me really, really well. Maybe even more than my university education at times.
Wow. Lebo, from a mother's point of view, from a parent's point of view, what do you think the role that the family play with this situation? It must have been very hard for you and Kabelo's grandma, your mother.
Yes. It was quite an emotional experience, you know. Just receiving the news of him wanting to leave, going through the whole process of getting him ready for the trip, having to accept that he's going to go into a country that we knew very little about, with a very different culture, language, and all those things that we heard about, in the media, which were not so comforting, to the family. And we had to deal with it because we felt that it was important that we support Kabelo. I think we believe, and certainly I believe that, as much as we sometimes do not necessarily understand and agree with what our children want to do, their thinking, we also need to realize that we're living in a very different time, so our children will do things differently, and so they should, because the world has evolved. So many things have changed. It would really be selfish of us to want our children to do life the way we have done life, So we tried to support Kabelo as much as we could. I did a lot of running around with him, preparing him for his move. We did everything from passport, visa, those vetting processes. So we were all very, very supportive of his or the journey that he's chosen for himself.
Sorry, Sam, can I just cut in quickly here, just to answer Mr. Mavuso's question over there about young people struggling to settle into a job that offers a career path in the long term, and you having all these young people turning into different interesting ventures. Do you mind if I comment on that really quickly?
No, feel free.
Great. So it's a really great comment, and something that I can comment on just currently in the industry that I'm in at the moment. So I'm involved in a company that operates in the affiliate marketing space. And these ventures that the young kids are able to go into are powered, by two things. I think one of them is a necessity that is just a lack of real opportunity, right? I mean, we've all seen that to get your first job, you need 2 years. It's an entry job, but you need 2 years of experience, and that's a really difficult barrier for entry. Just that one example, But now so there's that necessity, but we've also got this technology, which is a driver for these kids. And the technology I'm talking about the social media apps. We look at Instagram, we look at Facebook, and these are real powerhouses for online and e-commerce, right? And these are what the kids are really learning how to take advantage of. So I think that a lot of these new ventures, these entrepreneurial ventures, are built because they need to be built by these kids so that they can have a future that is financially secure. But it also is driven by the technology that they understand very well, that, even myself in the industry, getting a little bit older, I'm starting to lose a bit of touch with that technology. So I think that's what really helps drive this phenomenon that you're describing.
Did you get to fulfill your desire, Kabelo, of traveling? I'm sure you visited many other countries over there.
I think I cemented my desire for traveling when I was there, for sure. I was lucky enough to travel to, I think, 4 or 5 different countries while I was there. Obviously, I was living in South Korea. I managed to visit Cambodia, Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand. I ended up living in China. And then somewhere in between, I managed to visit America as well. So I did get a little bit of mileage under my feet, but I'm sure, as you would agree with me, there's never enough, right?
Never enough. Never enough.
Yeah, Dean, it sounds like I'm talking to the South Asian citizen here.
Exactly, exactly. I do want to chime in also and add some thoughts to this whole question about does culture affect the issues of career choices for young people. I think Kabelo is really highlighting a very important fact, which is that young people today are living in a world, not just a country, but a world that is globally connected through technology. And that technology is driving so much of the innovation and so much of the economy of the world today. So that there are these terrific entrepreneurial opportunities. And because the world is so connected, we have an awareness of other cultures and opportunities in those other cultures if we can take those opportunities, which is exactly what Kabelo did. So I do think that technology has driven uh, this opportunity for younger people and their career. The challenge, of course, is actually being able to find something that has traction, that you can get into, that you can work with, and that you can build a career from. That is still very, very difficult. Not because the ideas aren't there, but because getting involved with any organization without experience, just as it's been in the old days, is still a real challenge. So you have this awareness of great opportunity, but you have the real challenge of finding a practical way to get started in that. And I think that a lot of people, if they have the opportunity to travel elsewhere, feel that they may be able to solve that problem by doing it in a different country, and many times they can, and because it is a global world now, it's not just a local world, and so I think that culture does have an effect on it, but I think the bigger factor, the bigger influence is technology.
Mm. There's a comment coming from Louisa. Dean, you remember Louisa, the mother of the young lady that is in China that we had last time in the show.
Oh, yes, I'm glad to hear from her.
Yeah, she's asking, is fitting in a survival strategy rather than assimilation? I'm assuming people still subscribe to their own cultures, but do what is done in Rome to make life comfortable.
Well, I think you do have to fit in. You have to find a way to make whoever you are work where you are. And often that means when in Rome, do as the Romans. But that old phrase doesn't say when in Rome, be a Roman. It says when in Rome, do as the Romans. You can only be yourself. And if you are South African and you are in Rome, you are a South African in Rome. But you can learn how to fit in. And that doesn't mean losing yourself. It means adding to yourself. And I think that's very important. Most people, when they return from an overseas experience, they are challenged, as Kabelo mentioned, he was, in fitting back into the home. And sometimes that is a greater challenge than fitting into the place you're going to. Um, and and I think it's very important to remember that when you were overseas in someone else's home, in someone else's country, you learned how to adjust. You didn't give yourself up. You didn't become less South African. You simply became who you were, plus you added the skills to be even more than that in this new place in order to assimilate. And when you come back home, you bring those new skills with you. And so you look at your home country and you say, I remember this, but I've been changed now and I can see things a little bit differently. It doesn't mean you don't remember, and it doesn't mean you're less South African. It means you're South African with awareness and with more knowledge and with more skills to be able to do things in different ways because of what you learned.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Well said.
We thank you so much, Dean, for summing it up for us. With those words, I think we can bring the first segment to end, and we are going to be back in 5 minutes past the hour to enjoy the fun of the quiz. I always look forward to that. But before we do that, in 1 minute level, if you were to advise parents that are currently about to let go of their children into the world, from your experience, what that one thing is that you would want to advise them on? Or what type of an advice would you give them?
So the type of advice I would give Sam, having been in that position, is that as difficult as it might be, firstly, I would encourage them to be supportive of their children, allow them to spread their wings, to fly and to flourish, because I think it is an experience that no one